how do you cultivate, I know we'll go back to the kind of the particular schools, but how do you kind of cultivate that network after that initial connection? Because I think that's another thing that a lot of students are very curious about, is like, I can message someone for a quick coffee chat on for LinkedIn or virtual chat, but like, again, as a student, I don't necessarily feel like I've got a lot to give. So how do I do that with my connections?
I mean, I think you have to give, right? I think you have to give whatever you got, because, a cold like, will you help me outreach on LinkedIn may or may not work. And if you get that meeting, you have to make absolutely the most of it. So, come prepared, come ready to make a good impression. And if that means doing some research uh, on what they've done before, the investment theses that they're interested
In France, I think you summed it up pretty well. That you had an opportunity to stay in France, and you originally chose to do that. But I think it kind of speaks to a broader stuff of, how do you kind of, and I think the same thing happened when you transferred to MIT, where you had a pretty relatively, let's call it, easier path to become a PhD. And so, looking at it now, like, again, those are pretty momentous moments in your life where you had to choose staying at a PhD to MIT, staying in France. And originally you didn't always choose the do option. So, how do you kind of get yourself motivated each time to kind of take those risks, do you think?
The truth is that in life, you get lucky or unlucky, whatever you call it. Luck plays a huge role. Like, you have a chance encounter, you meet somebody, and this is you have an opportunity, and there's a lot of things that are just way, way beyond your control. And then what's imperative, though, is that when you do get those choices, when you do get those opportunities, is to identify them and seize them. And so, there's people always say that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Like, you can have a plan for your career, but like, nothing goes according to plan ever, right? And so when things outside of your plan come into your decision path, you just have to say, well, I'm going to rethink my plan here, and should I do this or should I not? And to your point, I didn't always, or at least always immediately, make the right choices. I've taken some turns that in retrospect weren't the turns I should have taken. But if you don't even recognize those opportunities, then you'll never take one, right? And it's very hard to benefit from those lucky breaks that one gets.
And what I think, speaking to that, I know you're a big supporter or proponent of mentorship. And so maybe you could go into a bit of that, of like, again, even as a 20 something, starting your own company with Firefly right after the MIT Media Lab, right? Like, was that pretty crucial for your career to kind of be able to be successful, was having those advisors? And if so, how do you think about those early in your career, to make sure you're kind of going in the right direction?
Yeah, mentors have been incredibly valuable to me. And I think, meeting people that you sort of want to be like or want to become someday, and finding a way to be useful to them or interesting to them, is a way to really find a mentor. And it doesn't always work every time, but I was super fortunate. As I said, this first mentor at UC Berkeley helped me not only get my first job, but sort of get interested in that whole career path that I was following. I had programmed computers for money, and I sort of counterintuitively thought that music would be my career and computers would be my hobby. And at Berkeley, I was able to put them together a bit because this guy showed me a path that I hadn't seen before. And I didn't have as many professional mentors in the startup world, to be honest, but I had incredible partners and teammates, and we were able to learn from each other and learn by doing, in this what then was a very new frontier, at least for me.
And for those students, again, who are looking to enter the industry, similar to how you faced a bit of disbelief or not much connection that LA could be a scene, venture capital tends to come from a few select schools, let's call it. And so I'd be very curious, kind of your thoughts on, how that starts to diversify, in your opinion, over the next several years. And for those students who don't come from those schools, or maybe don't come from a background where they're highly connected into those networks, how do you start to build those connections and kind of showcase your talent amongst the venture capital community?
How do I build a network if I've got no network? If it doesn't say Stanford on my MBA on my wall degree, how do I get in? I think, first of all, I think nowadays you have more opportunity than ever to build a network. I think if for example you have something to say, like I've seen more than one VC start as a Twitter account with lots of interesting observations, right? I think if you can build a track record, that's great, but not everybody has money to invest. But even if you can build a prediction track record or a thought leadership track record, that is one way in.
Do you think too that as a young professional, it's even better to kind of lean in more towards the do than do not, because you kind of have a somewhat of a higher risk tolerance with your kind of typically your everyday life, rather than as you get a little bit older, you tend to have a little bit more responsibility throughout that kind of career arc?
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I did my first company as a founder, I was in my 20s. I had no responsibility. I didn't have to support anybody but myself, and I was able to take the risk of a very low salary and a very uncertain path, and it paid off. And it's harder and harder to do that the older you get, as for the reasons you said, like you just start to have responsibilities. Which is another reason to just not get in student debt, because that's an early anchor on those years that should be pretty free, because you're not responsible for other people, or a lot of well, you're not responsible for other people.